In the real world, Cordyceps is a fungus of which one species reproduces by infecting ants with their spores and taking control of their bodies, then forcing them to move to a suitable location for the fungus to again produce more spores from the ant's now dead body, infecting even more ants and continuing the cycle. In The Last of Us, Cordyceps has become able to infect humans, removing mental control, resulting in aggressive, zombie-like behaviour. These infected humans are the threat that sets the story of The Last of Us in motion. When the main meat of the game begins, 20 years have passed since the first human Cordyceps infection. We're thrown into a world where for a long time humanity hasn't had the control they were used to. Skyscrapers have toppled, roads have been made almost useless by long abandoned vehicles, and plant life has been allowed to grow almost everywhere. The game offers up a setting where nature taking hold of the world again has allowed for a bright and varied colour palette, something I'm glad to see more games doing in a generation often criticised for its over-reliance on browns and greys to create gritty realism. In some areas, controlled by the infected, that same bright palette will almost disappear, replaced by a dusty filter explained in-game by the spores present in the air, along with the lack of anything brighter than that sort of dirty orange used for the fungus itself. A simple colour shift that can invoke that same sense of dread that a transition to a darker environment and an absence of light sources can. Sections like these prove to easily create enough tension to prevent me from completing the game in a couple of days like I'd originally planned to. A couple of times I'd see Joel put on his gas mask or hear infected noises nearby, and I'd decide that that'd be where I'd be stopping for the day. The infected themselves are an ever-present threat throughout the story and are the cause of more than a few deaths by the end. Gameplay encounters with them are usually spread out and always make sense in terms of where you find them and how many of them you face. They are always in places abandoned or lost by survivors, with more powerful variants of the infected being common in areas that have been left alone for a long while. Runners are humans who were fairly recently infected with Cordyceps. At this point in the infection, the fungus has only altered their brain function and hasn't yet caused many, if any, changes in their appearance. These are the infected we see in the game's prologue and are frequently encountered often in large groups throughout the rest of the game, indicating that humanity may be losing and are not in fact back on track for domination. Few surviving children are seen, and if people are still being killed and many have been recently infected, the overall population is probably dwindling. Stalkers are a stage of infection further on from runners. These infected have begun showing visual signs of the infection, with fungus erupting from their face and body. Aside from occasionally hiding from the player rather than sprinting straight at them, stalkers don't differ too much from the runners in how and when they are encountered and fought. I myself didn't realise they were another variation of the infected on my first playthrough. Clickers are the third shown stage of infection and a rich source of implied horror. They demonstrate that if left infected for long enough, the Cordyceps will grow out of a person's eyes, rendering them blind. The fungus also begins to encase the rest of the body, slightly slowing the clicker and making their movements more stiff. In terms of how often you encounter them, aside with how much of a threat they pose, clickers are the most dangerous infected. They're encountered around as much as groups of runners and stalkers, and can one-hit kill the player without giving an option to counter unless Joel has been upgraded with a specific ability. Clickers add a level of difficulty to infected encounters that makes stealth harder than it would be without them, but also more essential for survival. Being blind, they use echolocation to navigate the environment and will find the player if they make too much noise or stray too close to them. The fact that clickers aren't a rare sight helps reinforce the implication that a large percentage of the population has been infected over the past 20 years and can serve as a way to judge how long an area has been lost to the infection. The final stage of infection shown is the bloater. They are caused by the fungus being allowed to grow for so long that it encases the entire body, providing a thick layer of armour, making them tough to kill, and on some difficulties it may be preferable to avoid fighting them if possible, due to the amount of resources that can be used trying to kill them. These are the rarest type of infected in the game, which implies that to become a bloater, a person has to be infected for a very long time.
Bloater. Okay, got it.
I hate to interrupt your little biology lesson, but can we get the fuck out of here, please?
It's always a good approach when a game uses its enemies not only as obstacles for the player to overcome, but also as a method of storytelling through their design. The Last of Us isn't the first game to do it. Another example that comes to mind is BioShock, but here it's not explicitly explained. We get the basics and then we can work out the rest from our own observation. Overall, there wasn't a single encounter with the infected where, despite them being a very well designed and interesting enemy, I didn't wish I was fighting people with guns instead, and to me this was an essential part of the experience. Without the tension I got from slowly crawling past a group of clickers, knowing that I could at any moment alert them all to my presence, I wouldn't have gotten that overwhelming sense of relief when my biggest worry was someone putting a bullet through my head. Thanks for watching, and please let me know what you think.